Hello, my friend. I turned 81 not long ago. When you've lived this long, you stop counting birthdays and start counting the people, places, and seasons that quietly slipped away. I've said goodbye to lifelong friends. I've watched neighborhoods change until they no longer felt familiar. I've learned that growing older doesn't just change your body. It changes the way you see people. One thing age has taught me is this: time becomes far too precious to spend it carrying relationships that leave you feeling drained instead of peaceful. When we're young, we often tolerate almost anything to avoid disappointing others. We stay quiet to keep the family together. We overlook hurt feelings because we believe that's what love requires. But eventually, you reach an age where you realize something important. Peace is no longer a luxury. It's something you must protect. Today, I want to share 5 kinds of people I've learned to keep at a healthy distance in later life, even when they happen to be relatives, old friends, or people you've loved for decades. Now, this doesn't mean these people are evil. They rarely appear as obvious enemies. More often, they come wrapped in concern, obligation, affection, or family ties. Sometimes they genuinely care about you. Sometimes they don't even realize the effect they have. But if you aren't careful, they can quietly steal the joy, confidence, and peace you've worked your entire life to build. So be sure to stay with me until the very end, because the 5th person is the one that surprises almost everyone. Most people don't recognize them until they've quietly shaped years of their lives. Before we begin, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Take a moment to leave your city, state, or country in the comments below. It's always heartwarming to see people from all over the world coming together to share wisdom, kindness, and life's experiences. Number 1, the manipulator. Of all the people I've met throughout my life, this was the one who took me the longest to recognize. Not because they were loud or openly controlling. Quite the opposite. They often seemed kind, vulnerable, or simply overwhelmed by life's challenges. That's what makes a manipulator so difficult to identify, especially as we grow older. They don't usually control you through anger. They do it by creating a constant sense of urgency, responsibility, and guilt. Years ago, I became close to a man named Thomas after both of us retired. He was friendly, easy to talk to, and always grateful whenever someone lent him a hand. At first, I admired his optimism, despite the difficulties he faced. Every now and then, he would ask for a small favor, a ride to the pharmacy, help moving a few boxes, or someone to sit with him after a medical appointment. None of those requests seemed unreasonable, and I was happy to help. But, little by little, those favors stopped feeling occasional. Every week seemed to bring a new problem that only I could solve. If his car wouldn't start, he called me. If he was worried about paperwork, he wanted me to handle it with him. If something broke in his house, somehow I became the first person he thought of. There was always another crisis waiting just around the corner. What made it difficult wasn't that Thomas demanded anything. He rarely did. Instead, if I hesitated, he would quietly say, "I understand. I just didn't know who else to ask." Those words carried far more weight than an argument ever could. I found myself changing my own plans, postponing appointments, and giving up peaceful afternoons simply because I couldn't bear the thought of disappointing him. Looking back, I realized something unsettling. My days were no longer organized around my own priorities. Before agreeing to visit a friend or spend an afternoon reading, I would wonder whether Thomas might call. Without noticing it, I had begun living in anticipation of someone else's emergencies instead of my own life. This is how manipulation often works. It doesn't feel like someone is controlling you. It feels as though you're being a good person. You tell yourself that you're only helping, that things will settle down soon, that this is just a difficult season. But if every problem becomes your responsibility, eventually you stop making choices. You simply react to whatever happens next. One of the hardest lessons I learned is that love and kindness are not the same as unlimited sacrifice. Caring about someone should never require you to surrender your own peace of mind. Healthy relationships leave room for both people to breathe. They don't depend on one person constantly rescuing the other. Eventually, I decided something had to change. The next time Thomas called with another urgent request, I listened carefully, but instead of immediately saying yes, I paused. Then I calmly replied, "I'm sorry, but I can't help today." I didn't invent an excuse. I didn't spend 10 minutes explaining myself. I simply answered honestly. To my surprise, he found another solution. In fact, many of the problems I thought only I could solve somehow worked themselves out when I stopped rushing in. That experience taught me something I wish I had understood years earlier. Sometimes, by always rescuing people, we unknowingly prevent them from discovering their own strength. From then on, I gave myself permission to pause before answering every request. Sometimes I still said yes, because helping others is one of life's greatest joys. But other times, I said no without guilt. The more I practiced setting healthy boundaries, the lighter my heart became. And slowly, something wonderful returned to my life. My mornings felt peaceful again. My plans belonged to me again. Most importantly, I no longer carried the invisible weight of believing someone else's happiness depended entirely on my shoulders. Growing older has taught me that protecting your peace isn't selfish. It's one of the wisest decisions you can make. If these first few signs resonate with you, don't leave just yet. The fifth person is the one that catches most people completely off guard. Number 2. The self-absorbed narcissist. The second kind of person is much harder to recognize because they don't ask much of you. They don't borrow your money, rely on your time, or constantly pull you into their problems. In many ways, they seem easy to be around. But after spending enough time with them, you begin to notice an emptiness that is difficult to explain. You leave every conversation feeling as though you were present, yet somehow unseen. These are people who are endlessly interested in themselves, but rarely curious about anyone else. They enjoy having an audience, but they struggle to be a listener. At first, it doesn't seem like a serious problem. You tell yourself they're simply outgoing, passionate, or naturally talkative. But over the years, small patterns reveal much bigger truths. I remember a woman named Carol, who joined the same community walking group I attended after retirement. She was warm, energetic, and had a story for every occasion. Whenever we met for coffee after our walks, she could keep everyone entertained with tales about her grandchildren, her travels, or the latest project she had taken on around the house. She had a wonderful ability to fill every silence. At first, I genuinely enjoyed her company. But after several months, something quietly began to bother me. Whenever I mentioned something about my own life, the conversation lasted only a few seconds before it found its way back to hers. If I shared that my annual health check had gone well, she immediately began describing her doctor's appointments. If I talked about spending a weekend with my daughter, she responded with a much longer story about her own family. Even when I spoke about losing an old friend, the conversation somehow became about someone she had once known. It wasn't intentional, at least I don't believe it was. She wasn't trying to be cruel. She simply had very little space in her world for anyone else's experiences. One afternoon, I came home after having lunch with her and realized something that surprised me. We had spent nearly 2 hours together, yet she had not asked me a single meaningful question. Not one. She knew almost nothing about what had been happening in my life during the previous month, because every opportunity to ask had been replaced by another story about herself. That realization stayed with me for days. As we grow older, we often accept relationships simply because they are familiar. We tell ourselves that companionship is enough. But companionship without genuine interest can become surprisingly lonely. You may spend hours with someone and still feel as though no one truly knows you. Over time, I noticed another subtle change. I had started speaking less, not because I had nothing to say, but because I assumed I would be interrupted or redirected. I stopped sharing small victories, personal worries, and even simple observations because I expected them to disappear beneath someone else's conversation. Without realizing it, I had begun making myself smaller. That, I believe, is one of the quietest dangers of a self-absorbed person. They don't erase your voice by telling you to be silent. Instead, They speak so consistently that, eventually, you stop believing your own thoughts are worth sharing. One day I decided to change the way I approached those conversations. I no longer felt obligated to sit for hours listening without participating. When a visit had naturally reached its end, I politely excused myself instead of staying out of habit. If I wanted to share something important, I said it clearly without waiting for the perfect opening. And if the conversation immediately shifted away again, I no longer chased after their attention. Most importantly, I stopped measuring my worth by whether someone seemed interested in what I had to say. That was an incredibly freeing decision. Not everyone has the emotional capacity to see beyond themselves, and that is their responsibility, not yours. You cannot force someone to become curious about your life. You cannot earn genuine attention by speaking louder or trying harder. Instead, I began spending more time with people who asked simple questions like, "How have you been?" and then actually waited for the answer. I found friends who remembered things I had shared weeks earlier. They celebrated my happy moments and sat quietly beside me during the difficult ones, without turning the conversation back to themselves. Those relationships felt different. They felt balanced. Growing older has shown me that the healthiest relationships are never one-sided. Both people should feel heard. Both should feel valued. Both should leave the conversation believing their presence mattered. When care flows in only one direction, the relationship slowly becomes a performance instead of a friendship. And at this stage of life, none of us should have to perform just to feel seen. If you've stayed with me this far and you agree with what we've talked about today, I'd truly appreciate your support. Please take a moment to subscribe to the channel. It helps us continue creating thoughtful videos like this to encourage, inform, and support older adults everywhere. Number 3. The critic. The third kind of person is one of the most confusing because they often believe they are helping you. They don't insult you outright or try to start arguments. Instead, their criticism is wrapped in advice, concern, or what they call being honest. That gentle delivery makes their words much harder to question, especially when they come from someone you respect or love. Most of us were raised to listen carefully when older relatives, close friends, or family members offered guidance. We were taught that advice comes from experience and should be accepted with gratitude. And often, that is true. Wise advice can change a life for the better. But not every opinion deserves the same place in your heart. I remember a neighbor named Harold who had lived on my street for many years. He was knowledgeable, hardworking, and always seemed to have an opinion about how things should be done. Whenever he visited, he would notice something that needed improving. If he stepped into my living room, he would suggest moving the furniture because the room would feel more modern. If he saw me planting flowers, he would explain why I had chosen the wrong ones for the season. After I retired, he often reminded me that I should stay busier, volunteer more, travel more, or find another part-time job because, in his words, people slow down too much after retirement. None of his comments sounded particularly harsh on their own. In fact, many were delivered with a smile. He probably believed he was encouraging me to make better choices. But after hearing similar remarks month after month, I noticed something changing inside me. I began second-guessing decisions that had once brought me quiet satisfaction. I'd rearrange a room, only to wonder whether Harold would approve. I'd spend an afternoon reading on the porch, then feel guilty for not doing something more productive. Even small choices, like how I spent my weekends or what projects I enjoyed around the house, no longer felt entirely my own. That is the hidden cost of living with constant criticism. Rarely does it break your confidence in a single moment. Instead, it works little by little, like water slowly wearing away a stone. Every comment leaves behind a tiny question. Every suggestion plants a small seed of doubt. After enough time, you begin trusting someone else's judgment more than your own. As we grow older, this can become especially painful. By this stage of life, we have already faced countless challenges. We have raised families, overcome disappointments, worked for decades, and learned lessons that no book could ever teach. Yet a constant critic can make us feel as though we still need permission to live our own lives. One afternoon, after Harold had once again offered a list of improvements for my home, I caught myself preparing a long explanation for why I had arranged things the way I liked them. Then I stopped. I suddenly asked myself a simple question. Why am I defending a life that already makes me happy? That question changed something inside me. From then on, I responded differently. When someone offered an opinion I hadn't asked for, I listened politely if it seemed sincere. If it was useful, I accepted it with appreciation. But if it was simply another attempt to reshape my choices, I smiled, thanked them for sharing their thoughts, and carried on exactly as I had planned. I no longer felt responsible for convincing everyone that my decisions were reasonable. There is a great deal of freedom in realizing that you don't need unanimous approval to live a meaningful life. Growing older has taught me that wisdom is knowing which voices deserve your attention and which ones should simply drift past like the wind. Not every opinion deserves to become part of your inner conversation. Some words reflect another person's preferences, fears, or expectations, not your reality. The happiest older adults I have met all seem to share one quiet habit. They listen with respect, but they choose for themselves. They don't waste precious energy defending every decision or trying to satisfy every critic they encounter. Because in the end, your retirement, your home, your routines, and your happiness belong to you. And if your choices allow you to wake each morning with a peaceful heart, that is a success no amount of criticism should ever take away. Number 4. The irresponsible person. They miss deadlines, make poor decisions, ignore problems until they become emergencies, and somehow expect someone else to step in and put everything back together. The most difficult part is that they almost always have a reason. Nothing is ever completely their fault. There is always bad luck, difficult circumstances, or someone else to blame. As we grow older, we often become the people others turn to when life falls apart. We have more experience, more patience, and sometimes a little more financial stability. Those are wonderful gifts. But they can also make us easy targets for people who have never learned to carry the weight of their own choices. I learned this lesson through my nephew. Michael, after losing his apartment, he called one evening and asked if he could stay with me just for a couple of weeks while he found a new place. He sounded embarrassed, and I could hear the worry in his voice. I remembered what it was like to struggle when I was younger, so saying yes felt like the obvious thing to do. After all, family is supposed to help one another through difficult times. The first few days went smoothly. Michael thanked me repeatedly and promised he was already looking for work. He said this was only a temporary setback and that he would be back on his feet before long. But 2 weeks quietly became 2 months. His job search slowed down. Then it seemed to stop altogether. He slept later each morning, spent hours watching television or scrolling through his phone, and always had another explanation for why nothing had worked out. If I gently asked about his plans, he assured me he was working on it. Somehow, tomorrow always sounded more productive than today. Meanwhile, my own home no longer felt like the peaceful place I had spent years creating. The kitchen was rarely as tidy as I left it. Dirty laundry appeared in places it didn't belong. My grocery bills grew larger, while my quiet routine slowly disappeared. I found myself hesitating before inviting friends over, because I felt uncomfortable explaining why my guest was still living with me. What surprised me most was not the inconvenience. It was the constant feeling of tension. I started waking up each morning already feeling tired. Small things irritated me far more than they should have. Even my afternoon walks, which had always cleared my mind, no longer brought the same sense of calm because I knew I would return to unfinished conversations and unanswered questions. Then one afternoon, after returning from a routine doctor's appointment, my physician mentioned that my blood pressure had been higher than usual. He asked whether anything stressful had been happening recently. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because I suddenly realized how much of my emotional energy had been spent carrying responsibilities that were never mine to begin with. That evening, I sat quietly in my favorite chair and asked myself an honest question. Was I truly helping Michael, or was I making it easier for him to avoid changing? That distinction changed everything. Helping someone through a difficult season is an act of love. But removing every consequence from their decisions is something entirely different. When people never experience the results of their own choices, they have very little reason to make different ones. Older adults are often taught that sacrifice is simply part of loving your family. And sometimes it is. Parents sacrifice for children. Husbands and wives sacrifice for one another. Friends step in during times of genuine hardship. But there must also be limits. You are not responsible for rescuing every adult who refuses to rescue themselves. A few days later, I invited Michael to sit down with me after dinner. We spoke calmly, without anger or accusations. I told him I loved him, that I wanted him to succeed, but that he would need to find another place to live within the next month. I explained that my home needed to become peaceful again, and that I believed he was capable of standing on his own. He wasn't happy. He told me I was giving up on him. He said he needed more time. For a brief moment, I almost changed my mind, but I didn't. Sometimes the most loving decision is also the hardest one to make. Several weeks later, Michael moved into a small apartment with a friend and found steady work not long afterward. Seeing him take responsibility for his own life brought me far more joy than continuing to solve every problem for him ever could. As for me, something else returned. The house became quiet again. My daily routines settled back into place. I slept more deeply, smiled more often, and even my next doctor's visit brought better news. My blood pressure had improved, but more importantly, so had my peace of mind. Growing older has taught me that your home should be a place where you recover your strength, not where you constantly lose it. Offering help is a beautiful thing, but protecting your own well-being is just as important, because you are a person who deserves care too. And if you think these first four are eye-opening, wait until you hear the fifth one. It may completely change the way you look at one of your closest relationships. Number 5. The ungrateful person. They don't manipulate you, dominate every conversation, criticize your choices, or depend on you to solve their problems. In fact, they may appear perfectly pleasant on the surface, but over many years, I have come to believe that few things quietly wear down the human spirit more than chronic ingratitude. An ungrateful person has a way of making your kindness feel ordinary, as though it were simply expected. No matter how much time, effort, or care you give, it is rarely acknowledged for long. Instead of appreciating what was done, they immediately notice what could have been better, or what was still missing. I once volunteered at a small senior center where a group of us organized monthly gatherings for older adults who lived alone. We planned simple afternoons together: tea, homemade desserts, card games, music from years gone by, and plenty of conversation. The goal was never to create something extravagant. We simply wanted people to leave feeling a little less lonely than when they arrived. Among the regular visitors was a woman named Patricia. She rarely missed an event, and in the beginning, I assumed she simply had high standards. If we served sandwiches, she wished there had been soup. If we invited a local pianist, she wondered why we hadn't chosen a different style of music. When we decorated the room for the holidays, she pointed out the corners we had forgotten, instead of the hours everyone had spent preparing. Every month there seemed to be another complaint. The coffee was too weak, the chairs weren't comfortable enough, the program ended too early, the parking was inconvenient. No matter how much thought went into making the afternoon enjoyable, Patricia somehow managed to find the one thing that hadn't gone exactly as she expected. I thought perhaps if we improved enough small details, she would finally leave with a smile. So I arrived earlier, stayed later, and paid closer attention to every suggestion she offered. But nothing really changed. Each improvement was quickly replaced by another criticism. One evening, while putting away the tables after everyone had gone home, I realized something that caught me completely off guard. I wasn't looking forward to helping anymore. The joy that had once inspired me to volunteer had slowly been replaced by exhaustion. Not because the work itself was difficult, but because appreciation had quietly disappeared from the experience. That was when I understood something I wish more people recognized. Gratitude is emotional oxygen. Just as our bodies need air to stay alive, our hearts need appreciation to remain generous. A sincere thank you may last only a few seconds, but it reminds us that our efforts mattered. Without that feeling, even the kindest person can eventually become discouraged. This is especially true as we grow older. Many older adults spend decades giving to others. They raise children, care for aging parents, support neighbors, volunteer in their communities, and quietly put the needs of others ahead of their own. They rarely expect applause for those sacrifices. But everyone, no matter their age, wants to know that their kindness has been noticed. Being appreciated doesn't feed the ego, it nourishes the heart. After that season of volunteering, I made a quiet promise to myself. I would continue helping whenever I could, but I would invest more of my time in people who valued the effort, not just the result. I chose to spend afternoons with friends who laughed easily, thanked one another without hesitation, and understood that imperfect acts of kindness are still acts of kindness. Something beautiful happened when I made that change. Giving became joyful again. I no longer felt drained after doing something generous because the care flowed both ways. A warm smile, a handwritten note, or a heartfelt word of thanks reminded me why kindness is worth sharing in the first place. Growing older has taught me that the people you surround yourself with shape the atmosphere of your life. Some make every kindness feel too small. Others make even the smallest gesture feel deeply meaningful. Whenever possible, choose the second kind, because the final chapters of life are far too precious to spend with people who leave your heart feeling empty. Spend them with those who remind you, through both words and actions, that your presence, your generosity, and your love truly matter. As I look back over the years, I've realized how much our definition of a good life changes with age. When we're young, we often believe happiness is waiting somewhere ahead of us. We chase promotions, work longer hours, save for a bigger house, and measure success by everything we manage to achieve. There's nothing wrong with those dreams. They give us purpose during many seasons of life. But growing older has a quiet way of changing our priorities. One peaceful morning with a cup of coffee. A phone call from someone who truly cares about you. An afternoon without unnecessary stress. The freedom to spend your day the way you choose. These things begin to feel more valuable than accomplishments that once seemed so important. Eventually, you discover that peace is its own kind of wealth. That is why the people you allow into your life matter so much. The wrong relationships can slowly drain the joy from your remaining years, while the right ones make even ordinary days feel rich with meaning. Remember, loving someone does not mean giving them unlimited access to your heart. You can care deeply about a person while still protect yourself from behaviors that leave you anxious, exhausted, or emotionally wounded. Compassion does not require abandoning your boundaries. In fact, healthy boundaries often make genuine love stronger because they are built on mutual respect rather than sacrifice without end. So if someone consistently leaves you feeling worried, emotionally drained, burdened with guilt, invisible, or as though you have become smaller just to keep the relationship alive, don't ignore those feelings. Your peace deserves to be protected. You have spent a lifetime caring for other people. There is nothing selfish about caring for yourself, too. And if there is one thought I hope stays with you after today's conversation, it is this. You are still allowed to choose yourself. If this message spoke to your heart, I'd love to hear from you. Which of these 5 people have you encountered in your own life? And which lesson resonated with you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story may encourage someone else who needs to hear it today. Thank you for spending this time with me. Until we meet again, take good care of yourself, protect your peace, and never forget that your remaining years deserve to be filled with kindness, dignity, and the quiet happiness you've worked so hard to earn.